bit me too.
Damn. You guys let those bitches bite you?
Ragsdale and Angelica de Alba, who brought us Murder Size, brings us ONLYFANGS. And many of the cast actually return from Murder Size to ONLYFANGS. Now, ONLYFANGS, of course, a play on the popular social media app/website ONLYFANS. And of course, this movie actually has the concept based on the ONLYFANS model. Now, this is a campy horror comedy vampire with lots of kind of sexy ladies in it, lots of goth baddies for all you fans of the you know, the dark makeup and all the rest of it. What's the story? Well, it focuses on a quartet of female vampires, and they want to escape the clutches of their oppressive male master vampire. And these kind of now 4 female vampires are seemingly kind of lost, they're wayward, directionless, and by chance they run into a group of amateur monster hunters. Now, after an initial confrontation, the leader of this kind of band of paranormal investigators comes up with an idea that instead of attacking and killing humans, what they should do is actually sell themselves as a kind of fantasy for nerds, basically, to live out their vampire fantasies. And how they would do this, they will create a website where subscribers can pay, they can donate blood, and they can even pay for authentic vampire experiences where these female vampires will show up, drink their blood, and get paid for it. And of course, these victims think it's just a kind of an elaborate role play, but in reality, these female vampires are loving their undead life and getting rich, having their fill of blood, and having a great sort of unlife, so to speak. But this attracts some unwanted attention from maybe other vampires, hunters, and our leader of our quartet of vampires, Scarlet, would like to take the business in a different direction. What'll happen? You'll have to watch the movie and find out. So let's discuss. So this movie has a few familiar faces. Again, plenty of actresses you'll recognise from previous movies. Jessa Flux, Kansas Bowling, and you've got Eddie Church here as well. And the concept is obviously a play on the OnlyFans website. And I've got to say, if we start off with the positives, I actually think the concept works quite well for this movie, I will say. I mean, the idea here that, you know, you have these vampires, real vampires masquerading as kind of fantasy delivering cam girls that have this kind of like this goth personas and everything like that, given these authentic or erotic experiences, and they're getting kind of rich and kind of being able to feed on it. I think it's a great concept, and, you know, very timely. And obviously the OnlyFans phenomena, if we can call it that, has obviously become quite big in recent years, and I think this movie really kind of plays into it, and the concept lends itself very much to that. I will say as well, I kind of quite like the tone of this movie. It's obviously a sort of tongue-in-cheek. It's not meant to be a serious movie by any stretch. And the characters are all somewhat over the top and somewhat campy. But I was there for it. I mean, I have to say, the characters being so over the top, but not to the point where they're ridiculous. They're still sort of characters you can sort of root behind. And, you know, there's a sort of a somewhat cheesiness to the kind of the performances. But it sort of works in this movie's favour. Kansas Bowling plays our main good vampire, where she's a little bit more willing to kind of like work with the humans and be a bit more lenient. And we got our bad girl Scarlet, who's the kind of the leader, who is this kind of much taller and the sort of dominatrix looking one. I thought we were all sort of fun, like over the top characters in our group of like nerdy sort of monster hunters were fun. And you know, there's some kind of big personalities here, and I thought they were all kind of quite enjoyable to watch. You could have, you know, you could have. The characters are quite well rounded, and you kind of got to know them fairly well. Even though, again, they're kind of played to be sort of somewhat silly, somewhat campy, but you still kind of like them. And they were different enough where you could have had their own sort of personalities. You can kind of understand their different types of personality. There's one, for example, one of the vampires is just it's like has got these like rage issues and stuff, and she's just constantly sort of just like exploding into kind of rage and stuff, which I thought was quite fun. So I actually kind of quite like the performances. Again, they're on the campy side, they're on the sillier side, but I think it works for the tone of this movie. I think the tone of this movie is actually really good. Now, the next thing I'm going to say is going to sound like real high praise. This movie actually has moments of greatness, if you want my opinion. So much so, I would say this movie harkens back to the days of Fright Night and The Lost Boys in places, in moments. Partly because it has this absolutely fantastic synth-heavy soundtrack that will remind you of those great 80s vampire films. But also there's like a montage sequence, for example, where we have you know, a bunch of these kind of female vampires, and they're just kind of like one of them's like roller skating, one's on a carousel and things like this, and it's kind of slow motion, and it just reminds you of those kind of scenes from Fright Night and Lost. But I think, wow, this is taking me back to the glory days of the vampire movies, and I was totally there for those kind of sequences. I mean, it is just moments. The whole movie isn't like that. There are true moments of greatness in this movie that I really, really enjoyed. The effects are on the lower budget side, but there is a little bit of kind of, you know, practical kind of gore makeup, nothing over the top, but you know, there's a couple of wounds on the neck and stuff where you've got blood squirting out. I thought, well, it looks fairly good. You know, if you like sexy ladies, there's plenty of kind of sexy goth vampires in this one. Plenty of boobs, admittedly not from our quartet of main vampire chicks, but some of the kind of the newer recruits that we have later on down the line. You know, there's still plenty on display here, don't you worry. But yeah, a movie chocked full of you know, scream queens and goth chicks, enough to make any B-movie fan, I think, satisfied in regards to that type of thing. I think the movie generally has quite a kind of fun feel to it. It has an interesting sort of story to a point. It has likeable characters that are quite well defined and quite, you know, separate in that respect. It has an element of sexy to it, and I do think the general kind of entertainment value is there for this one. However, let's talk about what doesn't work in this film. The movie, I think, is a little bit too long. It's about 2 hours long. A film like this, I don't think, needs to be a relatively long film. It should be short and punchy. 90 minutes at a push, maybe 80 minutes. It kind of outstays its welcome, particularly in the third act. I think the third act, to me, it really seemed to kind of have a little bit of a wobble, and I think outstayed its welcome. Now, this is down to a number of reasons. I just think that the story could have been tighter overall. I think there are scenes that just play out too long. There are a lot of scenes, and as sexy and as fun as they may be, there's a lot of scenes of these girls just kind of like flouncing around and posing and things like that. I mean, you know, cool. But I don't know if we needed the movie to be 2 hours long because of it. There's also a lot of this. I mean, this movie was crowdfunded, and as I've mentioned with other movies that do this, when they do crowdfunding, one of the rewards that they often offer is a kind of remote role. So you have like a, you know, you film a couple of scenes on Zoom or over the internet or what have you, and they insert them into the movie. And this is one of those films where it kind of does that, but the movie stops and has like what feels like about 10 minutes of these kind of remote roles just play and play and play and play. And the film just stops dead in momentum. And it actually does it twice. The first time, thankfully, isn't that long, but, you know, overall, it's a little bit too much, I think. And I understand, and I've mentioned it where there were other films that do this. I totally understand if you're a backer, you want to see yourself in there and it's fun for you. But when you're watching this going in blind, the movie is just not fun like that. It's just stops the momentum. The cameras are always kind of like low res, and it's like these people, you know, they can't act. Not that, you know, this is meant to be like some Oscar-worthy movie, but it just absolutely deflates the momentum, unfortunately. But yeah, there's a number of factors here that I just think make the movie's pacing just a little bit sort of overblown, and I think the movie could have been better overall had it been a little bit more stringent in the editing room. Now I get maybe people have paid to be in the movie, but maybe only have like 3 or 4 people in these things. In my opinion, I mean, obviously people are going to make films how they want to make them. But the master vampire, the one male vampire that we see, I think is horrible. I don't normally like to point out specific actors, but everything about this character is misjudged. The acting is terrible. The way the character is depicted is just has no gravity. This character should have been somewhat of a scary character. The movie's not trying to be scary as such, but if there was one character that should have been a bit more threatening, it was this guy. And totally not. The character is just somewhat annoying, I have to be honest with you. Poorly acted, no charisma, no gravitas. The scenes just don't work. Now, he's not in it that much, thank goodness. But he's in the big finale, and I've got to say the finale as a whole, partially because of this one guy, but just generally how the finale is kind of set up, this big kind of conflict, it was quite poorly done. So the movie, unfortunately, doesn't end particularly kind of well. Not in regards to story elements, but just the big finale was somewhat poorly handled. Partly, but not only because of this one kind of master vampire. Also, we have, as I've mentioned, Ellie Church in this movie. Now, Ellie Church, I don't think has appeared in many of these guys' films before. But she has her own quite long filmography of kind of horror and sci-fi. So I was quite intrigued to see her with this group of actors and behind the scenes personnel. But I felt her role was a little wasted. It's a bit of a nothing burger, and it was a shame to have kind of a new actress in this kind of troupe of performers, all who have done a lot of films together, and her role to be, I felt, a little bit of a nothing burger role, to be honest with you, and somewhat sort of wasted. I mean, she's playing, not a sexy role, I would say, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a sexy role. But I thought it could have been more to it. There are some sort of other issues with this movie, and again, it's a low budget film. I appreciate that. There's some technical issues. The beginning of the movie suffers from some quite bad ADR, unfortunately. So again, it seems to get better as the film goes on, but the first act in particular, there's some quite awful ADR. Some of the effects, aren't particularly high tech. It's not, we've got these fangs that just look like they could have been glued on. Some of the kind of the scenes look a little bit amateurish at times, and again, I appreciate it's a low budget film. As silly and goofy as I think some of the kind of the characters are, there are a couple of times where you feel like they could have done with another take. Let me just put it like that. I think the actors here are capable of doing a movie like this well, but there are 1 or 2 takes I feel could have been a little better. I'm not expecting high art in a movie like this, but there's a few takes here that I think could have been redone and had a little bit more, in tone with the rest of the movie. Ultimately, I think for the most part, I think the actors do a fairly good job of giving you a flavour of these characters and making them quite likeable. But yeah, just a few sorts of things here that I think they could have been a little bit sort of tightened up. Look, maybe a couple more takes. Overall, I think this movie is still an enjoyable film. If you're a fan of B-movies, there's plenty of kind of eye candy. It has a fun vibe. I love the music, and it genuinely has some great moments for me. And I think had the movie had a few more of them and less of the kind of like maybe the filler, which I think this movie does, it could have been a cult classic in my opinion. As it stands at the moment, I do think this movie probably ranks as an above average film for me. In the context of it's a B movie, but I don't think it's necessarily a classic. I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10. Worth a watch if you like sexy vampires, that's for sure. Have you seen it? What were your thoughts? Leave me a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time.
This horror movie will sink its fangs into your nightmares!